Call Don now, 682-1270. News Talk 1270 KIML.
News Talk 1270 KIML. Don Carpenter Show. Welcome back. It's 8:08, and we're going to go right to the phones. We have a special guest at this time. And on the line, we should have Eddie Garcia from Fox Sports Radio and the Puck Podcast, puckpodcast.com. Good morning, Eddie. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Don. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's always a pleasure to talk hockey. You have to excuse me. My voice is a little weak today, but it's always a pleasure to talk hockey, and that's one of the things I get all the time. You don't talk enough hockey. You don't talk enough hockey. Well, today's the perfect day. Today is the perfect day to talk a little hockey. Playoffs start tonight. Wow. So let's just talk a little bit about some of the matchups. Is there a matchup that you're looking at and you see a definite one that we want to make sure that we don't miss?
I do, actually, and there's a couple of them, but I'll start with one that maybe a lot of people here in the U.S. might look at and think, that's not too interesting. But I think the Montreal Canadiens against the Ottawa Senators is going to be a great series. Montreal was the Atlantic Division champs, while Ottawa was a wild card team, but Ottawa made NHL history this year. They were 14 points out of a playoff spot at one point in the year. No team had ever come back from that many points down to make a playoff run. They did. They finished the year 16-3-3 and just made it into the playoffs. They're red hot, carrying a lot of momentum into the playoffs, and they've got a goalie named Andrew Hammond who was in the minor leagues to start the year, wasn't a highly thought of prospect. He came in after an injury and has been unbelievable, a record of 21-2. And his nickname is the Hamburglar. They've been throwing burgers on the ice after wins in Ottawa, so they're having a lot of fun with it. They're really playing great hockey down the stretch. It's almost like they've been in playoff mode for a couple of months because they've had to come from so far down, and it's been a great story. So they're coming in with a lot of momentum. Montreal, meanwhile, although they're a very good team and their goalie Carey Price may be the league MVP this year, they may not have Max Pacioretty, their leading goal scorer, 37 goals during the season. He suffered a concussion, 2 games left in the year, and hasn't played. And practiced yesterday, but reports were that he didn't look very good and that he's doubtful to be in tonight's Game 1. So I think that's a very intriguing matchup. I could see it going 7 games. And, again, it looks on paper like, you got a 2 seed against a 7 seed, but when you look at the numbers and you look at how they've played lately, I think it could be a very entertaining, competitive series. And over on the West, you've got the Minnesota Wild against the St. Louis Blues. St. Louis comes in, again, it's another 2 versus 7 matchup. But, again, Minnesota, a lot like Ottawa, really playing with a lot of momentum right now. And they made a trade midway through the year that no one gave a second thought to. They acquired goalie Devin Dubnyk from Arizona, and he's been kind of a journeyman, played on some bad teams, but he completely changed the fortunes of Minnesota, had a record of 27-9-2 since taking over the starting job and propelled them into the playoffs. So I think those are 2 really intriguing matchups. You've got a couple of goalies that are making their playoff debut in this one. For Ottawa, you've got Andrew Hammond, as you mentioned, and then Jake Allen looks like he's going to start for St. Louis. So interesting couple of matchups. I think both of those could be very entertaining 7-game series. Well,
and I will say we have a couple Wild fans around the station here, so they'll be happy to hear that the Wild have a good chance. I just kind of wanted to go back to the Ottawa and Montreal for a second. And this is maybe I come from the East Coast originally. I'm actually a Devils fan, so I didn't have a very good year at all. But it seems like the Habs they're like the Yankees of hockey. I mean, you either love them or you hate them. And having an upstart Senators team like that, it really makes for a great story.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, Montreal, I don't know that they're the favorite this year, but certainly the history that they have. We talked about Carey Price, their goalie, who I think is going to be the league MVP this year. But they don't have a lot of high-scoring players. They get it done with defense and their goaltending and, guys scoring timely goals. So it's not like they're an offensive juggernaut or anything like that. But yeah, they've certainly got the tradition. They've got the high expectations. So they carry that into the series. But it's really, I don't know if it's David versus Goliath. Maybe as far as tradition and history goes, it is. But Montreal comes in with the big fan base in Canada, and Ottawa is going to be kind of the upstart. But I think a lot of people in hockey, and probably certainly north of the border, are kind of getting on board, getting on the bandwagon with Ottawa because, again, it's such a good story. And even they've got the kind of feel-good thing going because their general manager, Brian Murray, is battling. He's got cancer, and, he's the guy who put this team together. And so that's even another layer to the story for Ottawa.
Well, yeah, absolutely. So, of course, you mentioned some of the teams that are, hot at the right time, which is a huge advantage. Especially, it seems like the NHL is especially susceptible to that kind of momentum. Are there any teams that have the exact opposite, where they just kind of backed in?
Yeah, actually, there are. The Nashville Predators, who were one of the better teams earlier in the year, were playing great at home. One of the surprises this year, they did not make the playoffs a year ago. They're coming into their series against Chicago on a 6-game losing streak, and they just haven't been the same team in the second half of the season as they were in the first half. Meanwhile, Chicago is getting their star player, Patrick Kane, back. He had a broken collarbone, but he's been cleared to play in Game 1, so that's going to be a huge boost for them. And Chicago's been a power the last few years, and once playoff time comes, they just step up their game to another level. So I think Nashville's in some serious trouble. And over in the East, I think the New York Islanders are kind of similar. They had a real good first half of the season, but haven't played that well of late. Their record was 6-7-5, a losing record since March the 1st, so they kind of backed into the playoffs. They're taking on a Washington team that's not a powerhouse, but is playing a lot better hockey than New York is. Alexander Ovechkin is the star player for Washington. He was the leading goal scorer in the NHL this year with 53 goals, and the Capitals have the top power play in the league. So the Islanders and the Predators certainly not playing very good hockey going into the playoffs. I know they're hoping to kind of hit the reset button now that they finally made the playoffs, but that's certainly easier said than done. And both those teams who, again, had very surprising years, especially the Islanders, and they were 22 points better this year than a year ago, so really stepping up their game. But, again, just not taking a lot of momentum into the playoffs, unfortunately, for them.
Yeah, well, and I will say, I mean, it's tough, especially when you're going up against Ovechkin. I mean, he's one of those transcendent stars that you have these days. I mean, are there any places we should be looking for an upset? I mean, you mentioned maybe Ottawa, could be in the place for an upset. Is there another one maybe we want to watch and see if the underdog does pull one off?
Well, a couple of intriguing matchups out west that have a possibility. The Anaheim Ducks, or the number 1 seed in the West, taking on the Winnipeg Jets, who are the number 8 seed. And Winnipeg, had to play really well down the stretch to get into the playoffs. And if you want to talk about home ice advantage, I don't know that there's going to be a better one than Winnipeg. If you don't follow hockey, they're kind of the Cleveland Browns of the NFL in that they had a franchise originally. The team moved away. They became the Arizona Coyotes. And then after several years of wanting to get a team back, the former Atlanta Thrashers moved 3 or 4 years ago back to Winnipeg. So ever since that happened, they've been, so happy to get a team back in Winnipeg. They're finally making the playoffs for the first time since they made that move back. So tickets are going like you can't believe in Winnipeg. Matter of fact, they've sold out all their tickets, and on the secondary market, they're asking for like $600 for tickets in Winnipeg. So I think as far as the home ice advantage for them, that building is going to be completely crazy, and the team might be able to be energized by that. But they are taking on a very talented Anaheim Ducks team. But the Ducks have had their issues recently in the playoffs. Their head coach, Bruce Boudreau, if I can use another football analogy, kind of the Marty Schottenheimer of hockey. Great regular seasons, but every time they get in the playoffs, they seem to fall short. He has a penchant for changing his goalies whenever something goes wrong and not sticking with the guy, and I think that's not served him very well. And there's a potential for that again with the Ducks. They got a couple of good young goalies, but no real established stars. Looks like they're going to start the playoffs with a guy named Frederik Andersen, and we'll see how long they stick with him. So I think if the Jets can steal one of those first 2 games in Anaheim and go back home with all that momentum, there's a chance that maybe they could pull a big upset.
Yeah, and I will say that would be an amazing story just for the sport of hockey and the NHL in particular. Just Winnipeg really, and again, kind of relate back to my own personal experience back east. I don't know how I'm a New Jersey Devils fan, but I grew up near Baltimore, and of course, Baltimore losing the Colts and then getting the Ravens. It's kind of a similar story. They really have gelled behind that team. It's a heartwarming thing to see.
Yeah, obviously, you never want to see a city lose a team. Obviously, keeping that comparison with Cleveland, that was a team that, or a fan base that had supported that team for many, many years, and even playing in an old, rundown stadium and a lot of bad teams, they still were there. It was more of an economic thing in Winnipeg at the time for them to move to Arizona. But this franchise, as it sits now, the former Atlanta, now the new Winnipeg Jets franchise, they'd never even won a playoff game. So Atlanta made the playoffs once. They were swept in 4 games, and now Winnipeg has made it for the first time. So I definitely think they're going to break that streak. I think that franchise will get its first playoff win this year for sure. Okay, so I did a little research, and I saw you're a Kings fan, so it's got to be tough. And trust me, I've been through this. Your team wins the Stanley Cup. They had a great run last year, and miss out on the playoffs this year. It's always kind of a letdown when you don't have the defending champion in those brackets, isn't it? Yeah, it definitely is. It's only the 4th time, in the modern era of the NHL that it's happened. I obviously follow the team very closely, cover the team here in Los Angeles, and I'd love to be able to give you a clear, definitive reason why they didn't make the playoffs. But, there's a lot of people that have their theories, and I'm sure it's a combination of things. But the bottom line is, the season they had a year ago and the talent they had coming back, which is virtually the entire same team coming back, really no excuse for not making the playoffs. I think there were some things you could have pointed to as reasons as to why they probably wouldn't repeat, and we haven't had a repeat Stanley Cup winner since the 70s, to make that the 97-98 season. But to not make the playoffs with that roster, no, that's not acceptable. I still don't think you're going to see a lot of major changes out of the team because they still do have a lot of good players. Maybe they now have the motivation that they need, having suffered through the embarrassment of not making the playoffs. But still winning 2 Stanley Cups in 3 years, they've accomplished a lot of great things. And it's very disappointing that they're not in the playoffs to kind of defend that crown. But I do expect them to be back and be a factor next year. Well,
now, do you give any credence to this whole story where Coach Sutter was locked out of the locker room after one of the games?
You know what? I don't know, honestly. There's so many specifics that we don't know about because on the one hand, the initial report that came out recently said that this happened in the last weeks of the season when the team stumbled down the stretch and didn't make the playoffs. The general manager came out and admitted that it did, in fact, happen, but he said it happened months ago when they were actually in the middle of a winning streak. So that didn't make much sense that they would lock the coach out during a winning streak. He kind of explained it as a players-only meeting that wasn't handled properly. The coach has blown it off as being nothing. They kind of have pointed to it as being kind of they want their players to kind of be, responsible for what goes on in the locker room and kind of take that leadership and take that ownership. And sometimes that means telling the coach, hey, we don't need to listen to you right now. We'll kind of handle it ourselves. Was that something that happened? I don't know. It certainly is a very odd situation that I'd love to know more details about, but it certainly didn't look good, that's for sure.
Well, and every once in a while you hear one of these stories. You don't know exactly where they come from, how much is true, how much is not true. Whether it was a rib, who knows? It could have just been a practical joke of some sort that got twisted into a million different stories. But I figured I'd ask you about it just to get your take on it. We're almost out of time here, but I want to make sure we make sure we talk a little bit about your podcast. You do the Puck podcast as well as being on the Fox Sports Radio. Tell us a little bit about what you do with that.
Well, it's it's a labor of love. Me and a longtime friend of mine, who's another huge hockey fan. About 7 years ago, we were just talking about how we just don't feel that hockey gets the attention it deserves, and I guess we thought, well, what can we do about it to kind of help the situation? And the podcast thing was kind of just getting going as far as people kind of creating their own shows on the internet, and I obviously have a broadcasting background, so we just started doing it. We had no expectations of what in the heck was going to happen with it, and we've done a show every week for 7 years, and we've got listeners literally all over the world. It's been great. It's been very popular, and where it goes from here, who knows? But we're still having fun with it, and we're still doing it. And I know you said you have some listeners who say you guys don't talk enough hockey. Well, if they want to hear some hockey talk every week, all year round, we do it in the off season as well. They can go to puckpodcast.com, or they can go to iTunes and search Puck Podcast and find the show, and hopefully listen to it and like it.
Oh yeah. This is hockey country up here. We have a Tier 3 junior team in town and draws 1,000 people a night. I mean, it's amazing. Just at that level, it really is amazing. So we do love our hockey up here. Again, I want to thank you, Eddie Garcia at Eddie on Fox on Twitter. I want to make sure we mention that as well. Of course, we can hear you on Fox Sports Radio as the update anchor, right?
That's right. I do the overnight shift, 11 a.m. or makes that 11 p.m. 6 a.m. Pacific time. So you're catching me as I'm just got off work a little while ago.
Yeah, actually, I probably hear you on Monday mornings when I'm driving into work at 4 o'clock in the morning. So thanks a lot, Eddie, for talking with us, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you soon.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, Don. It was great talking to you, and anytime you want to talk some hockey, you got my number.
Okay, always a pleasure, always a pleasure. And on that note, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. News Talk 1270, KIML.
He's not bald. That's a solar panel for a talk radio machine. Don Carpenter on News Talk 1270, KIML.